Welcome to chapter 23, the book of Exodus. We continue with God's decrees, judgments, laws, commands. Here it starts off about judicial conduct. It has to do with the judiciary, the judges. You shall not welcome a vain report. An echo comes from that, a vain report. Well, I'm not exactly sure what that would have been back in those days, but I was thinking about today. It would be something that somebody brought a case against somebody that was to be thrown out in court. Basically, it didn't have any substance to the case that person was bringing. I know one fellow that he just wanted to go to court and sue people for all kinds of a bad reason, no reasons whatsoever. Whatever he found, he just enjoyed going through all that rigmarole, and he would be his own lawyer. So welcome not a vain report to a judge, something that's really not, don't even accept the judgment of it. Not shall you assent together with the unjust to become an unjust witness. So unjust people want to come against somebody by being an unjust witness. This is what happened with Jesus. They brought false witnesses and they paid them to come, I believe it says, and they came against Jesus with these unjust accusations. So don't assent together with unjust people to become. Now, this isn't the judge here. This would be somebody that was doing something that was unlawful. You shall not be with many people for evil. Kakia, we have the kaka, has to do with evil or bad, something bad. You shall not be with many people for evil. And so they always, in every society, have a lot of people that are evil. I don't know what percentage of people on the earth. Well, everybody has some evil in them because we're all sinners. But some people are really just evil people, and other people are really good-hearted. So don't be with the evil people. If you are with a bunch of friends, they're always wanting to do something that's illegal, or they would harm somebody or make fun of somebody, even if you're in school and you're doing things that you know you shouldn't be doing because it might hurt somebody or the teacher or another student, so forth, or at work, joining other people to cause somebody a problem. It just goes on and on. So don't be with many people for evil. Stay away from the evil works that a lot of people want to get together. Sort of like the mob mentality that they want to get together, and the mob takes its own persona, and a lot of times they unjustly will accuse somebody and then hang them. That happened in the American South more than once. And so these types of evils with mobs of people, even though a lot of people may say something is true, it doesn't mean it is. And then he continues, you shall not be added with a multitude to turn aside a judgment. So you don't go along with all these people to turn aside a judgment. Or if you're a judge, just because a lot of people are against somebody doesn't mean that they are actually guilty. And this happens sometimes with certain social groups. If a person has done something against that race or ethnic group, then the other people will cop an attitude against them. And then that pressure can cause another person to join in to that pressure of doing harm to this person. Now, a multitude turning aside a judgment. There was a judge that was in the Nazi Germany, Roland Friesler was his name, and in 1942, which was fairly early in the war, different groups got together, and not got together, but different groups formed against the Nazis, to come against the Nazis, and they were prosecuted tremendously whenever they were caught, as you can imagine, by the Nazi court. Well, this Roland Friesler was the prosecutor, the judge, and the jury. He did it all. And then he would ridicule people when they were in front of him. Just the worst imaginable judge that there is. And there was a group of young students, a resistance group to the Nazis, and they called, and they were mainly in university, and there were different ethnic and religious backgrounds. It wasn't all the same people, but they formed the resistance group, and they were called the White Rose. You can look up the White Rose on the internet, on Wikipedia, and read about it. And this Roland Friesler, and he was this unjust judge. And when these men got together to bomb the building that Adolf Hitler was in, and it didn't kill him, and afterwards they found out who they were, and they put him in front of this Roland Friesler, who, of course, found them all guilty. And one man, when he was going to the trial, he was a general, a top general, and this Roland Friesler had the papers for the trial, and the American airplanes came over to bomb Berlin, and they dropped a bomb right, and so Friesler got all the people to get out and go down to the bomb shelter, and the witnesses and so forth, and he went to grab the papers, and the bomb fell right on top, and a big column crushed him to death. And so that was the end of Roland Friesler. But he was, if you read about it, there's even a movie on the Shoals, and so I think it's something to do with the White Rose and how bad he was. It was of course, it was made after wasn't real, but they may have even have they might even have some movies of his courtroom. I'm not sure. But anyway, in 3 it continues, and you shall not show mercy in a judgment because one is needy, and the needy you shall not show mercy in a judgment. So just because somebody is poor doesn't mean you will let him off. And if you should meet up to the ox of your enemy, now he's going to the behavior of a person, or to the beast of burden wandering, by returning you shall give it back to him, to the owner. So if you see an animal wandering, you give it back. Don't keep it. And if you should see the beast of burden of your enemy falling under its load of merchandise, like a camel, and couldn't carry it, it's too heavy, and it started falling down, you shall not go by it, but you shall raise it with him, even help your enemy. And this is what Jesus proclaimed in many places about turning your cheek to your enemy and going the extra mile with them and so forth. He expanded on this in the New Testament. You shall not turn aside a judgment of the needy in his judgment. Now here, if a person is needy and he's poor, that doesn't mean you turn aside the judgment for him if the other person was rich or powerful. You give the needy person the true judiciary due. From all things unjust you shall abstain. So justice is preeminent, and the judiciary is set up. Earlier, they had these men that would listen to cases of the people that Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had him do. So there was this was a judiciary set up, and God has developed this laws and also a judiciary thousands, 3,500 years ago. And innocent And the just one you shall not kill. So if a person's innocent, you shouldn't kill them. Well, they killed Jesus. He was innocent. Pontius Pilate said he was innocent. And he took him in front of the Jews, and they said, crucify him, crucify him. And he said, he hasn't done anything wrong, crucify him. And so he was crucified. So killing the innocent is exactly what happened with Jesus. And you shall not give justice to the impious one because of bribes. And you shall not receive bribes, for the bribes blind the eyes of seeing, that is the judge, and lay waste just matters. Justice is lost when the judge takes a bribe to find somebody either innocent or guilty. That was actually the opposite. And you shall not maltreat the proselyton, the proselyte, a foreigner, nor in any way afflict. For you know the soul of the foreigner, for you yourselves were a proselyte in the land of Egypt. And now he goes into the other laws as far as agrarian laws, not the judiciary. 6 years you shall sow spiris, a spear, comes out of the ground. You shall sow your gain, land, geology comes from that, and you shall gather its produce. So 6 years, work the land, but on the seventh, Ebdomo, you shall make a release from work and spare it, that is the gain, because it modifies the gi, teen gain, of teen, spare the land. And the poor of your nation shall eat. So apparently the people that didn't have any money and they were very poor were allowed to go and glean in the seventh year of whatever they could get off of the vines or in the fields for themselves. And the things being left behind of them, the wild beasts of the field shall eat. So whatever is left after the gleaners, then the wild beasts can come in and eat it. And thus you shall do with your vineyard and your olive grove, not only the wheat and the barley and so forth, the grains, but also your grapes and your olive trees. 6 days you shall do so imagine the olive trees, you could, whatever was there, they could squeeze it and have olive oil. 6 days you shall do your ergonomics works. But on the seventh day you shall rest. And earlier, as we mentioned in chapter 16:29, they were not even to go outside of their house or residence. So you rest on the seventh day. Now, it doesn't say Sabbath here, the seventh day, so I believe that that's valid. Even today, we're to rest on the seventh day. Don't do any work. Now, all the different sabbatical laws as far as things I don't think apply to the non-Jew. And that's my opinion. But the seventh day rest is a good thing. That your ox may rest, and your beast of burden, and that the son of your maidservant may be refreshed, and the foreigner. All, as much as I have spoken to you, guard. So allow them to rest on that seventh day. In the name of other gods you shall not call to mind, nor should one be heard from out of your mouth. Now, I was going to find the spot and I forgot, but it's in the Psalms, and God says that the gods of the nations are demons, and that still holds today. The God of Israel, Yahweh, are the being one, and in the form of Jesus who came to earth from the Father, this is God. And any other deity that's called, you don't call them to mind, nor do you use their name, let it come out of your mouth. So today there is one God among a lot of Arabic people who basically don't even mention that God, small g, God's name. Shouldn't even be in our mouths. 3 times of the year, solemnize a holiday to me, in the imperative, 3 times. And that means come basically to the temple, or was in the tabernacle, or in Jerusalem, or is in Bethel before it got to Jerusalem. The holiday of the unleavened breads, that's with Passover, keep to do 7 days. You shall eat unleavened breads, that's flat bread, like a pita breads or matzah, crackers, and so forth. You shall eat unleavened breads, just as I gave charge to you, according to the time of the month of the new produce. For in it you came forth from out of Egypt. So now that was, go back, and it has the month and the days and everything. Earlier we went through all that. You shall not appear before me empty. So when you go to God, you give him something. And I believe that's the case today, as much as the seventh day rest. If you go to a God with anything, for anything, then you take something to offer to him in some way or another. Your imagination can do better than I can of how you could be doing that. Other people, and we don't have sacrifices anymore, and Christians will never really did, because Christ was the sacrifice. But even, it's a good idea even to bring gifts to your friends when you go to their house. Bottle of wine, or cake, pie, some type of food. If you go to a person of a high authority, like an emperor, king, or a president, then bring a gift to him. It's just a good thing to do. I would bring him one of the Bibles, the Apostolic Bibles, to somebody in a higher authority. I wouldn't charge him or anything. It would be a gift. And a holiday of the harvest of the first produce you shall observe of your ergon, or works, and whatever you sow in your agro culture comes from that, in your field. So they're to give of the first produce of the field. And a holiday of completion at the conclusion of the year, in the gathering of your works of the ones from out of your field. 3 times a year, every male of yours shall appear before the Lord your God, in tabernacles, different places in the temple. Whenever, now, they don't have a temple, so I don't know how they can appear before God today. For whenever, you might say, well, going to Jerusalem, yeah, well, maybe. For whenever I should cast out the nations, ethnic comes from that, from your face, and widen your oriasu, your boundaries, horizon comes from that. You shall not sacrifice with yeast the blood of my sacrifice offering. It's not to be risen bread during the sacrifice. Neither shall the fat of my holiday feast remain through the night until morning. It was to be burnt and eaten. The first fruits of the first produce of your land you shall carry into the house of the Lord your God, which he will give directions on how to build this later. And you shall not boil a lamb in its mother's milk. Mitros, we have maternal, and galacti, the galactic galaxy, Milky Way, comes from that. Shall not boil a lamb in its mother's milk. Interesting. And behold, I send apostello, that's the Apostolic Bible, comes from that word, sending my angelon, my messenger. Now, an angelon is, many places it's a messenger, is heavenly, and it would be an angel. Well, here, It could be an angel. It could be many different things. It could be the messenger. I send a messenger before my face. I believe the one he's talking about right here is Moses. And God is telling them that he's sending Moses, because later on we'll go through this. But the angel could be the messenger, an angel. I believe prophets were definitely messengers. Some prophets came to all the different kings and people. And then in the New Testament, we have the angels again, and then we have John, the one immersing, John the Baptist. He was a messenger. And then Jesus was a messenger of the Word of God to people. And I believe that we are messengers, you and I, that are bringing this message of God, Christ, to the world that needs to hear this so bad. We are messengers, angelos. I went to around the corner, I went to the Sandbar, a little bar right on the beach, and they had football there, and I wanted to watch a game. It was Oregon, where I live, that was playing in some bowl. And so I went there, and the place was packed as I walked in, and one table had a seat, and one man was there. So I said, may I sit there with you? And he said, yeah, sure. And so he said, but I'm not going to be able to talk or anything because I'm interested in this other game. It's Notre Dame. And they're playing somebody, SC or somebody, University of Southern California. And then he said, my father played for Notre Dame, and I went to Notre Dame. My father was in the game that Newt Rockne and win one for the Gipper game that Ronald Reagan made famous in the movie Newt Rockne, and his father was the quarterback, and he was a small quarterback, but he was the quarterback in that game. And this man, Jerry Brady, I met him, and that's who he was. He introduced himself. And so right away, it was something, it was a break, and he said, what do you do here? I said, I live right around the corner. He says, oh, really? Yeah, I said, where do you? And he said, I live over in Idaho. And I said, oh, okay. And he says, well, what are you? What do you do? I said, I'm an angel. I can't believe I said it. I'm an angel. And he looked and he said, what? And I said, I'm a messenger. I preach the word of God to people. And, spent the whole game. He never looked at the game. We talked about God and what he was doing, he was on a search for God. And isn't that amazing? We spent the whole game. He didn't watch it. After the game, I invited him to my house, and I ended up giving him a Bible, and then he ended up, found out that he had just ran for governor of Idaho and lost by a couple hundred votes. And then he was the editor of a newspaper in Great Falls. I think it was Great Falls, Idaho. And so he wrote an article about how he met a messenger in a bar in Newport, Oregon. So we're messengers. We just don't know what God has to bring us, who he has to hear us. Then 21, take heed to yourself and hearken to him, and do not resist his persuasion, the messenger. For not in any, now he's talking to the people, for not in any way should he avoid you. He's going to tell them, for my name is upon him, and it's upon us, upon Jesus, John the Baptist. If in hearing you should hearken to my voice, and should do all as much as I give charge to you, I will be an enemy to your enemies, and I will be an adversary to the ones being an adversary of you. For my messenger shall go leading you, and he will bring you to the Amorites. So, see, that's why I believe here he's talking about Moses. He's telling the people to follow Moses. Moses is hearing the things from God, and he's telling them, because he's going to bring them to the Amorite, the Hittite, Perizzite, Canaanite, Girgashite, Hivite, and Jebusite, and nothing here about an Idaho person. So this is Moses. And I will obliterate them. You shall not do obeisance to their gods, and they had a lot of them, nor Baal is the main one, and Ashtart, nor shall you serve to them, the gods. You shall not do according to their works as far as the peoples of the nations to their gods. But by demolition you shall demolish them. Now, I don't believe we are to demolish people. I think in the New Testament we are to demolish them by love, and protecting ourselves is a different thing. But demolish them through the word of God. It's sharper than a two-edged sword, able to stick right into where it needs to be stuck. And by breaking, you shall break their monuments. Stelos. A stele was a monument, sort of like the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., which is a stone edifice that goes straight up, I don't know, a couple hundred feet. And this was a stele. Their monuments, whatever they had. And you shall serve to the Lord your God. Latrevsis, latria, psychiatry, atria, latry has to do with serving. And I will evlogizo, eulogize, I will bless your bread and your enon, vino comes from that, wine, and your ethor, hydro, comes from that, and I will turn infirmity from you. And it will not be barren, that is the land that you go into, nor sterile upon your land. The number of your days I will fill up, and the fear of me I will send leading before you. So they're going to be afraid of the Jews that are coming there, and still are today, and will startle all the nations into which you enter into them. You're going to be startled. And I will give over all your opponents unto exiles. They're going to flee. And they went through Edom, Moab, Ammon, and then into the northern part of, not northern, central part of Israel, Jericho, and so forth. And I will send the swarm of wasps in front of you, and will cast out the Amorites. I just was watching a video on a guy with a remote helicopter type one. He had four propellers, and he set up a couple of cameras. He had this huge wasp nest hanging by his barn. So he gets way far away, and he sends in this remote control helicopter with this, and all these wasps were coming out and flying around, and they figured, they thought it was the other camera that he sent up. He set up two other cameras, and somehow all these wasps thought there was that camera. It was on a tripod, a big tripod. So they attacked this camera and actually knocked the camera over, all these wasps. But this helicopter went right in this, zipping like a chainsaw, right into the wasp nest. And they come flying out, and very interesting, very entertaining. So that is the swarms of wasps in front of you, and and I will cast out the Amorites and the Hivites and the Canaanites. Now, what the wasps were, I don't know if it was literal wasp or something that would cause them to fear and leave. And you didn't want to be around when these wasps came. And I will not cast them from your face in 1 year, so that the land should not become a wilderness. And many wild beasts should happen upon you in the land. So he's not going to get rid of it and then let it lie fallow for a year or two before they get there. And then all these animals will be taking over the whole area. So he says, according to mikron, micro comes from that. A little by little I will cast them from you, until whenever you should grow. Oxythes, an oxen, it comes from that, growing, something that helps things to grow. And to be heir of the land. And I will establish your, again, horizon, boundaries, from the Erythros Thalassies, the Red Sea, unto the Sea of the Philistine. Now here we don't have the allophilo, which is more of a slang Greek word for the Philistines. This is true Philistine. It's transliterated into Philistine. Today they're called the Palestinians, very similar. Now the boundaries from the Red Sea. Now, for some reason, when they were crossing the Red Sea, some people come up with an idea, it's not the real Red Sea. They didn't go there. They went, it was called the Sea of Reeds, and they come up with all these different ideas because people that come up with this like to sell books in the olden days, and they'll come up with new ideas. So somebody that wants, oh, wow, maybe it's something else. And they'll buy the book and they'll make money on it and so forth. And I get people writing me about that. And it's like, hey, it's been Red Sea for throughout the Bible. There's no Sea of Reeds. Or why would somebody come up with that? And it's non-existent. It's red, erythros, red, to the Red Sea. And unto the Sea of the Philistines, which would be the Mediterranean, and from the wilderness unto the river of the great Euphrates, which is way, way up almost, it's right on the border of Turkey and Lebanon. And that's their border. And I will deliver up into your hands the ones lying in wait in the land, the Amorites, Hittites, and all those peoples. And I will cast them from you. And you shall not assent together with them. You don't go in there to join them. And with their gods you shall not establish a covenant. And they shall not lie in wait in your land. Don't let them stay. Lest, and they are there today though, the great country of Israel, they're given, oh yeah, go right back. One day, go in there. They went in there. Have they gotten rid of all these people? No, and they're still fighting them ever since. Every day somebody's being killed by the Philistines, the exact people that's talking about here, still around. Israel hasn't set up a temple, hasn't set up a priesthood or nothing. And so, anyway, they shall not lie in wait in your land, which is not being done today, lest they should cause you to go into sin against me. Well, they are. There's a lot of ungodliness. A lot of the Soviet Union Jews came with atheism and brought it, and then you have a lot of gay people, gay Jews, that are listening to the things of the other peoples and so forth. And so it's really just terrible, and bringing in Israel into sin. Probably a very difficult place not to be bombarded by sin all the time. You would think it should be the opposite. For if you should be a slave to their gods, these will be to you for an occasion for stumbling. And that's exactly what happened with the third king. They had Saul, David, and then Solomon, his son, who brought in these other gods because he married women from all these other nations, and they wanted their gods. They wanted temples to their gods, and he built them. And they caused the Jews an occasion for stumbling. And ever since then, Israel has been stumbled over Jesus, didn't see who he was. And Paul, many places in the New Testament, he causes their stumbling is mentioned. The stumbling stone, Jesus, was a stumbling stone to the Jews. So more laws, and we continue with them, and we're given information on the scroll of the covenant here, and we'll find out what that's all about in chapter 24 in our next video seminar. I hope you'll join us. Till then, God bless.